Good morning. We are starting session 2 of the Ed Collab gathering. I hope you enjoyed your session 1. I am pleased to present Sarah Gross, and she is going to talk about the nature walk, the intersection of science and the English class. So Sarah, take it away.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I guess I'll start by telling you a little bit about myself. Good morning, everyone. I usually get strange looks when I talk about the intersection of science and English because we tend to think of them, especially in the secondary classroom, as two very distinct subjects, each in their own classroom and rarely intersecting. But I actually graduated from a STEM high school, started my college career pretty certain I was going to be a biology major, and then as a reader and writer, ended up turning to English because I wanted to share that and to be a teacher. But now, many years later, I'm actually pursuing a master's in teaching biology, so you can and should combine the two because we do it with our students at my high school all the time, and it really does open up a whole new world to them. So science and English, one of the best ways to bring them together is definitely through nature. Specifically, we do a lot of nature walks, a lot of time outside, and we were inspired very much by Dr. David Haskell, who wrote The Forest Unseen, which is an amazing book of essays. Dr. Haskell teaches at University of the South in Sewanee, and my colleagues and I actually have our students read the New York Times every day, and about 3 years ago, there was a front page Science Times article about Dr. Haskell and his upcoming book. And it had a beautiful picture, and it caught our attention, so the students read it. As teachers, we said, oh, I wonder if Dr. Haskell's on Twitter. It sounds like he's doing something really cool. He was on Twitter, and long story short, we reached out. We ended up ordering the books for our students, and we've been using them ever since. I think it's great for grades 6 through 12 because Dr. Haskell's book is written as a set of essays, so you can read them in one sitting. You can pull essays out, and he actually ended up going outside and adopting a square meter of space in a forest on his campus or right outside his campus, and he visited every day for a year and wrote about his observations. And he's interested in poetry. He is a scientist, so it was an interesting collaborative effort within his own life that we use to inspire our students. So I do teach at a STEM high school, and I teach freshmen. I teach all of the freshmen. I'm very lucky to have cooperative colleagues who are happy to experiment and try things. But you can do this in your own classroom. It's even better if you can reach out to a science teacher and see if you can do things together so that our students see that not everything is in its own little box. So we decided, my biology colleague and I, that we were going to have our students do the same experiment that Dr. Haskell did, and that we would focus specifically on science communication. Because even if you don't want to be a scientist, everyone needs to understand science. And I think that's even more clear these days as we are in the run-up to the next presidential election, and every time there's a debate or a candidate makes a statement about science, I end up feeling like I should bang my head on the desk because the science isn't always correct. So I want my students to be able to understand the basics of science, to be able to think critically about it, to be able to converse about it, even if it's not what the field that they plan to go into. And as an English teacher, I also think that science can inspire us, nature can inspire us. And if we think about all of the classic literature that we know that has been inspired by spending time in nature, Walden, of course, immediately comes to mind, but there are so many other great poems and essays and novels and nonfiction pieces out there that our students maybe aren't as aware of, and especially because their world tends to be centered around a screen. And I spend a lot of time on social media, absolutely, but I also think it's really important that they see the world around them and really pay attention to it and learn how to communicate about that world. So I have a favorite quote that I will get my screen sharing going here that I just want to share with you quickly. And only through art can we get outside ourselves and know another's view of the universe, which is not the same as ours. As an English teacher, that's really important to me. I want my students writing. I want them to be comfortable sharing their thoughts. And one thing that we all have is the world outside of our classroom. And you don't have to have a forest. You don't have to have a beautiful meadow. It can be the lawn outside of your classroom. It can be out the windows if you're on the second floor. There are ways to access nature that we can bring into our classroom without worrying about losing a lot of time or, oh, we don't have enough nature. So when I first meet my students, my 9th graders, I tell them we're going to combine science and English. And I get a lot of strange looks. And then I share with them, and I'm sorry, I feel like I might make people seasick, but I want to share a quick picture of the article. I share with them the article from the New York Times. And if you're interested, you can go on the New York Times website. It's Finding Zen in a Patch of Nature. And it's a nice article about the work that Dr. Haskell did. So I share that with them. And we talk about why a scientist would be interested in just observing nature and observing a small piece of nature. It's 1 square meter. And at first, my students are usually a little bit hesitant. They're very STEM driven. They're very science and math focused. Sometimes type A personalities, and I think they'd agree with that if I asked them. So English seems a little wishy-washy. There's a lot of gray areas to them. So this does make them a little more comfortable in terms of combining my English class with something that they're more comfortable with. So I do like to help them in that way. And for me, personally, I've been involved in science my whole life, even though I'm not a science teacher. I do a lot of citizen science. I did my student teaching in 3rd grade, and my amazing mentor teacher raised monarch butterflies in her classroom, and I caught the bug, no pun intended, and I've been doing that for many years. I got a fellowship and went down to the overwintering grounds, and I brought that back into my classroom when I student taught in 3rd grade, when I taught 6th grade in middle school, and now that I teach 9th and 12th graders, I do the same. And for me, one of my favorite quotes is, in the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand. We will understand only what we are taught. Our students spend a lot of time attached to screens. And so do we, to be honest. And one of my favorite parts of every school year is that time that we spend outside, because they do learn to appreciate the world around them. It's very easy to worry about saving lions and elephants, and I want to save the rainforest. But it's a rare occasion that our students feel that sense of place, that place attachment to what's in their own backyard or their own schoolyard. And I want to help them to feel that. I think that's really important. And then at the same time, because I want them to see the value in this, I know my students plan to go into engineering, many of them computer programming, things like that. So I share with them the fact that, engineering, for example, from software development to biomedical applications, requires a lot of skills. And they're listed on the slide that I'm sharing with you now, which is from an amazing article, Nature is the Best Training Ground for STEM Careers, and really for any career, because taking the time to observe nature helps our students to hone those skills of observation, looking at patterns, making relationships between what they're seeing and between the classes that they're studying in. So that's really why I do this. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how my colleagues and I make the time to do this and what exactly we do when we are outside with our students. And we are outside in every type of weather that you can imagine, much to my students' chagrin much of the time. So what we do is, and it's varied every year depending on how much time we have. In the very beginning, we took our students out once a month. The very first day, we have our students read the introduction to The Forest Unseen, and one of the first essays. The essays are arranged by season. So we have them read one about fall. My biology colleague usually has something that he's studying in class at that time, and we try to find an essay that goes along with that. And we take our students outside. We bring measuring tape, we bring popsicle sticks, and we bring yarn, and we set them loose. We say, you can stay in this area, and we are lucky that we have a small man-made pond on the edge of our campus. We share our campus with a community college. So while we have a lot of lawn space, we do have some fields and a man-made pond. So we pick an area to bring our students where there are sort of natural borders for them. So, okay, you have to stay within this area, and everybody has to pick a spot. And that's going to be your spot for the rest of the school year. And that's a lot of fun because it's the first time for a lot of my high school students that they're really stopping and getting to pay attention to what is going on in the natural world around them and getting to pick what interests them in that natural world. So they'll move around sometimes for a half an hour. I like this space. No, maybe I want to be under a tree. No, I want to be near the pond. Our biology teacher will talk to them about, abiotic and biotic factors and what they might be studying in class or the research that they might be doing in the future. And when they pick their spot, their job is to measure out 1 square meter. So we bring a little bit of math class in there. They sketch it in their notebooks, and then they sit. And this is difficult for some of them. We have them choose this place, and Dr. Haskell said to our classes back in 2012 when we did a Skype call, don't go looking for a special place. Instead, find a place and make it special. And that really resonated with my colleague and I, because all too often our students are looking for that perfection, something that is going to be amazing and life-changing. And you can't always pick that out, in a half an hour just wandering the forest or the field. So we tell them they're going to make that place special. So once they've measured and they've picked it, they sit down, they take out their writer's notebooks, and they just observe. The biology teacher usually gives them an assignment, perhaps something like list all the abiotic and biotic factors that you see in your square meter. I'll often challenge them to sketch something or to sketch their entire square meter if they're comfortable. And then I also ask them in their notebooks just to jot, perhaps in a bullet list, what they're seeing. What do they see? What do they hear? What does it feel like? Using their senses. And this is a great way for us to practice some descriptive writing, but in a low stakes environment. And no one has the excuse there's nothing for me to write about, because you can move the leaf litter on the ground. You can look at the grasses that are growing. Perhaps there's a tree. We tell them they can look up. Are there birds flying over them? Do they hear cars in the distance? Maybe they hear a bird singing. So they jot all these things down. And we start small, maybe 5, 7 minutes, 10 at the most, where they're just observing. Because like I said earlier, that's a challenge. Even for adults, we don't spend a lot of time just being in a place. So for my students, they start out usually in larger groups. They wander with their friends. They want to see, where's my friend going to sit? I want to sit near them. I'm sharing with you now a picture of some students from a few years ago, traipsing through the woods, trying to decide where they want to have their spot for the year. And eventually, they do end up splitting up. We tell them they have to be able to see somebody else from their mandala. And that's what Dr. Haskell calls it, his mandala. So we adopted the same terminology. And as long as they can see someone else and they're within the boundaries, that's a safe spot, and that can be their spot. So these 3 students here actually ended up, if I remember correctly, sort of standing up with their backs to each other and walking like 10 or 15 paces out and then just sitting where they were. So they were within sight of each other, but they each had their own spot. And because a forest ecosystem can vary so much on that almost micro level, of just this square meter, everyone was in a different type of spot. One would have a fallen tree in their spot, somebody else was under a sapling, and someone else was in an area of just grasses. And they take that time to look around and to see what's really here. And there are all different types of writing that they'll do over the course of the year. They'll make lists, both for biology and for English class. Lots of observations, both in biology and in English class. We write poems, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. Wonderings, to steal from Georgia Hurd's amazing book, what they're wondering about, what it could be in science or in English. They'll do sketching, field guides, we'll talk about figurative language, and all of these can be a part of science communication, biology class, and English class. We find that intersection. So, as I said earlier, in the beginning, we went out every single month. Unfortunately, that became unsustainable in the second year when our state adopted Park, and we didn't have the flex time to bring the biology and English classes together as often, but we did sit down and map out 4 times over the year. We wanted once in each season because I think it's important for our students to see the different seasons, and that really works out to once per marking period. So they were able to track changes in their mandalas over that time. So my biology colleague, Mike, and I have Google Docs going all the time, and we come up with an assignment for the students, usually to read something in Dr. Haskell's book or something in the newspaper. If there is a current event that seems to fit into this, or if Mike finds something in a science journal, then he might share that. But the students always have a reading prior to the meeting, and it could be a new reading or a rereading. And then on the day of our adventure outside, we have a fun day sheet. We call these fun days for the forest unseen. That sheet will have a list of the goals, because we think it's important for our students to know what the goal of the session is. And it will list for them usually some biology content and some English content and what they are supposed to be accomplishing during this time. And I'm going to share with you now just a sample of what one of those fun sheets might look like. And it's a little cut off. I apologize for that. So it's fun day. This was day 4 last year, I believe. Each of our classes are divided up into triads, so groups of 3 students, and they each have their own individual mandalas, but when we do collaborative work, that's who they work with. And this makes it a little easier for us as we go through the school year, because we don't have to break into groups and things like that. So you'll see at the top we have our goals. We usually pick a reading or a rereading related to the season that we're in. So in this case, they were rereading the December 3rd entry in Dr. Haskell's book. And the December 3rd entry is actually titled Litter, but it's one of my favorite in the book. And it usually ends up being one of the favorites of the students because it takes place in the middle of the winter and talks about maintaining body temperature and what the soil is like in the winter at this time. So our challenge for the students, and we tell them this prior to the day, is it's going to be winter. We can't control if there's snow on the ground, if there's precipitation falling, and we really do try to go out, rain or shine, within safe guidelines, of course. So their challenge is to read the essay and do this work and also maintain a comfortable body temperature while we're outside. And it's always funny because they're high schoolers and they think they know how to stay warm outside for 30 minutes, and they often don't. Sometimes it's appalling what they come in wearing, and we're like, no, you're gonna freeze. So that's always one of our challenges. We also have data folks that Mike, my bio colleague, assigns that to students, and they measure soil temperature, air temperature. He'll have challenges for them each week, and they each time we go out, and they'll track that through the extent of the project. That's also a great job for students who maybe are not able to get outside. whether it's due to a health issue or just beyond their ability at that time. Working with the data is a way for them to stay connected to this project without actually physically going outside. And you'll also see then that we usually have an intro. They'll write down, in this case, any changes in the state of their resident organism. They're in charge for bio of picking a plant or an insect, something that lives in their mandala at the beginning of the year, and sort of tracking it through the year. And then for English at the bottom, they have a challenge to take notes on the back of the sheet about their feeling as they are outside for 30 minutes. And then over the next few days, they will write a narrative paragraph using Dr. Haskell as a mentor text, describing in both biological terms and narrative terms how it feels to sit outside in the freezing cold. And for many of my students, this is the first time since they were in elementary school that they're, playing in the snow or sitting outside in really cold weather like that. So it's fun for them, maybe not in the moment, but it's fun for them as they write it to really think about how I feel, what I'm doing, things like that. So I enjoy that, and they enjoy that. And when we do this, we have the students share their writing with us. I often have them share it in a Google Doc because they bring their notebooks outside, and we tell them that, again, rain or shine, will be outside. Sometimes there's, snow landing on their notebooks, things like that. So they get wet. And they feel much more comfortable being able to go inside and type it up over the next few days. And for me, it helps because I can gather all of their information in one spot. So, technology doesn't have to be completely separate from the nature walk. We just tend to use it after the walk. Or sometimes, if we're looking up the name of an organism, or we found bones once, which was really fun, and spent a lot of time trying to figure out where they came from. So we do use that technology, but we are very much like pen and paper when we're doing this. I'm a big fan of field notes notebooks and the weatherproof notebooks, and a lot of my students become fans of them too. But even just paper and clipboard works for jotting down, what are you seeing? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? We also let our students take pictures of what they are doing. And I'll share with you now one of the summaries or the narratives that a student wrote a few years ago about how it felt to sit outside in the snow. And we did not plan on it, but there was snow on the ground when we went outside. And then it actually started to snow very lightly while we were out there, some of that like heavy, wet snow, which was a challenge for the students. And we did end up going in early, but it was really interesting to then read how they felt during that time. So I challenge them to use figurative language because Dr. Haskell does in his book. And you'll see that in a lot of science writing. That science writing that's meant to communicate with the public at large tends to rely on figurative language because that's how our brain makes connections, those similes, those metaphors. So this is one of my boys who wrote this a few years ago, and he was not a kid who would tell you he loved writing, and probably not a kid who would tell you he loved being outside all of the time. He was into sports, into his computer, but he did a beautiful job. As I read it, I felt like, wow, like I'm out there with you. I can hear the crunch of the snow beneath your boots. And he had gone through the snow and found the layer of pine needles underneath. And he used the sense of smell to get the wet aroma, which I'm sure you can imagine, even though it's not winter yet, thankfully. That mixture of wet soil, leaf litter as it's rotting, the pine needles, and then that scent of snow, you can just recognize when you get it on the air, like, oh, it's going to snow soon. And then it started snowing, and he described the blotches of liquid as they landed on his paper, making it transparent, what the tree across from him looked like. And that's what I love about this. The students really do learn to start paying attention to all of these small things. Hey, that tree, and we'll say, what tree? You should look up what kind. Okay, that birch tree. had leaves on it when we came outside in September. Then when we came out in November or December, the leaves were gone. Now what did it look like in January or February? Now what does it look like in April or May? And they get to watch all of these changes occur on a large level, like a tree, all the way down to what the soil itself looks like. And then along with a lot of this narrative writing we do, and my biology colleague will also challenge them to do a lot of writing more biology centered. So we'll get a good deal of writing out of them just from this time that we spend outside. I also participated in an amazing project a few years ago called Voices from the Land. Voices from the Land is part of the Monarch Teacher Network, which is part of the reason I'm a monarchaholic, raising monarch butterflies. But the Voices from the Land project looks at the intersection of language and landscape, specifically in terms of eco art. And I love eco art because it's something that I can do. As I tell my kids, I can't even draw a stick figure. We do a lot of sketching in English class, but you would never label me as an artist, ever. But eco art, especially eco art that uses Andy Goldsworthy as a mentor, is something that anyone can do, from kindergarten to adults. And I've seen, preschoolers and adults do this separately and together. Eco art is ephemeral, so it uses what is already in the environment. You don't bring anything in, and you don't destroy anything. You use what's already on the ground or easily available. Think weeds, things like that, to create art. And the biology teacher will help the students use field guides and a lot of cool apps to identify the plants and other sort of natural litter that they find to create the art. And then I have them document that art using usually their phones, but we have a few digital cameras at school, and I always have my phone and my iPad out on these walks too. And the students create art. And I'll share with you now a little bit of the art my students have created. And I've done this with high schoolers and middle schoolers, but I have friends who've done it with students in preschool. So this was actually summer art created by some of my students. And it was amazing to watch them do this because they would never have considered themselves artists, but they were tying dandelion stems together and gathering leaves to make the crown outside. And it was beautiful. And then they, figure out where to stand and position themselves to get the best picture for this. And then the next challenge for them is using those pictures to write a poem about their experience. And I love this quote: "Trees are poems the earth writes upon the sky." Poetry can be very intimidating for a lot of us, students and adults alike. But when you physically participate in creating the art that you're writing about, it somehow becomes a little easier. It's not as intimidating. And because the Voices from the Land project involves art and technology, the poetry doesn't seem as overwhelming. We usually have our students work in groups to do this, and they'll spend about 40 minutes, figure a class period outside creating the art. And I've done this in every season. We've done it in fall, which is maybe my favorite because you do have all the different colors of leaves and the kids can play with color. And there's a lot available for them. But in winter, you have snow to play with, and that can be really interesting. And same thing in spring, you have now all the flowers coming in. We usually don't get out there in summer, but I've done it in a camp during summertime. So because it's ephemeral, the students don't feel as intimidated by the art, because if it's quote unquote bad, as they say, it's gone. If the wind comes, it will blow away. If they go back a day later, it might be there, which is fun for them. They'll go check if they have time. Or if they have no interest in finding out because they think it was not good art, it's just gone. Animals can walk through it. It could blow away. It could rain on it. Some are more ephemeral than others. We have students who their art consists of dropping something into a pond off of the small dock and getting a picture, and then it's gone. Then they'll take those pictures and we'll print them up inside or pull them up on the computer, and together they write this poem about their experience, and they'll brainstorm together. And again, Voices from the Land is amazing. They do workshops all over the country, and I'll tweet out the link to them. It's also at the bottom of the slide. If you ever get a chance to take the workshop, I highly recommend it, especially if you can get your school to send you and a science teacher together, or a whole team of teachers, because it's such an amazing interdisciplinary project. And the product at the end, you can print posters or put together a photo book. It's just beautiful and a nice advertisement for the school too. But the students are challenged to write that poem, and it can be about the process of creating the art. It can be about what the art makes them think of. It can be about their piece of art itself. And I'll share with you another piece of art that the students created last year. And again, this is the fall, because they're the prettiest ones and probably the easiest for students to get pictures of, because the leaves, if it's not that windy, they don't blow away. Snow can be easier to see in person, but harder to photograph because of the lighting and all of the white space. But again, we've done it in all different weather. So this piece inspired some really awesome poetry from my students. And what we do in the end is I have created, this is actually a photo from a photo book that we created on Shutterfly. And on each page, we put a picture of the art, a picture of the students who created the art posing next to it, and then the poem or poems written by their group. And this I created when students were in 6th grade. And I actually ran into a student a few months ago who remembered doing this, and her parents had purchased the book from Shutterfly because they had contacted me and said, "Oh, we saw you made one. We'd love to have a copy," as parents do. And she said that they still have it, and she loves looking through it. And she's like, "I can't believe we wrote a poem. Like, I never thought I'd write poems, and now it's in a book." So it's a really great experience for kids. And then the Voices from the Land project also has a website where you can create posters. Students can drag and drop and either share them electronically, or you can print them digitally. You can email them to parents, email them to students. So there are lots of different ways to access it. And the students are always so proud when they're able to combine these STEM subjects. Like, I'm great at technology. I'm great at photography. I feel like I'm a good writer. And usually they all feel like they're bad artists for one reason or another. But all of a sudden they create this amazing project. It's one of my favorite things to do with students. So again, Voices from the Land is absolutely amazing. And I know they have a bunch of workshops coming up this fall. I took a workshop, I think I've done it twice now here in New Jersey, and K through 12, it works for anyone. So you can see their brochure and everything. Like I said, I'll tweet out the link, and I have nothing to do with them other than I'm in the Monarch Teacher Network, but it's such a fabulous experience. And you really, if you are looking for a way for your school to support this interdisciplinary work, I know sometimes they want to see something tangible and they want to see some PD from it. That's a great way to involve everyone. And also, as an English teacher, I know sometimes it's hard to convince content area teachers to give up time. And that is something to be aware of. I spent a lot of time over the last few years surveying content area teachers, grades 6 through 12, all over the United States. And the number one reason they say they don't do writing in their classroom is because there's just no time. They have so much content to get through. And I understand that. We all understand that. But if you can find a way to make everyone's lives slightly easier by saying, hey, look, I can check off these standards, you can check off these standards. And for students, they can kill two birds with one stone. One activity might get them 2 grades or 2 assessments in a class, 2 experiences. And they have that tangible grade or product at the end, but they also get the experience of, hey, science and English class aren't completely separate. So last year, my bio colleague Mike and I surveyed our students, and we asked them at the end of the year, what did you get out of this, specifically for biology, and what did you get out of it for English? So with respect to biology, students said things like, I knew changes in nature always occurred. However, I was able to see and document changes in my mandala over time. We don't give students a lot of time to just be, I guess, and just observe. And taking them outside on a nature walk, whether it's once during the year, 4 times, 10 times, whenever you can get them out there, it gives them that opportunity to start seeing the world around them through different eyes. Another student said, I've realized how biology can show how the ecosystems of our world work, how both abiotic and biotic factors have an effect. So as a biology teacher, that would make me very happy. Because look, we have specific terminology in there, specialized vocabulary, all of that, is really important. And then things like sometimes I should just be quiet and observe my surroundings. That's an important life lesson too, I think. In regards to English, students said things like, when you cannot rely on graphs or charts or illustrations, use your skills as a writer to convey visual ideas to your readers. That's new for a lot of my students. My students who are so focused on, lab reports and journal articles for science, using infographics, using charts, all of that is really, really important. But sometimes there are things that you can't convey through a chart or a table, and you have to convey it through your words. So we give them the time to practice that. I learned that you can write about a topic by breaking the boundaries of what's commonly expected to entice the audience. That actually came about after we Skyped with Dr. Haskell, and he talked to them about how he still loves poetry and he still does all this writing. I actually saw on Twitter he's teaching a nature writing class, I think next semester, that I was like, oh, if only I lived closer. But for a lot of our students, they're so used to, this is a persuasive essay. This is an argumentative essay now that you're in high school. Now this is narrative. This is memoir. This is a research paper. That, they learn it's okay. You can break the rules and you can combine all of these genres and types of writing. And then, of course, as an English teacher, one of them said writing can be fun. That's huge for a bunch of STEM kids. Really, really huge. So that made me very, very happy. So I think it's so important that we take the time to show our students how humanities is not just something you push to the side. Because they don't tend to see careers in the humanities as easily obtained, I guess is a good way of saying that. It's easy to say I want to be an engineer. I want to be a scientist. I want to be an accountant. I want to be a teacher. But they don't hear, I want to do something in English. I want to do something in history. They tend to see those as just a gray area. I like to show them you need humanities. You can never be just an engineer or just a scientist. I mean, take a look at any of the job postings on something like monster.com or Career Builder, and no matter what industry you look at, they all say strong writing skills, strong communication skills. That's necessary. And even more so than that, I'm going to share with you one of my favorite posters from the College of the Humanities at the University of Utah. And they actually have a whole set of these, but this is one of my absolute favorites. And I have to get one for my classroom. But science can tell you how to clone a T-Rex, and humanities can tell you why this might be a bad idea. We have to teach our students that STEM thinking and humanities thinking are not completely separate from one another, that they have to work hand in hand, or we will end up with Jurassic World someday in the future. That our students are the ones who will make the big decisions as we go forward, and they have to be good critical thinkers. They have to be able to take care of the world around them at the same time. And a lot of that can't come from just science class. It has to come from the humanities too. And even more so, it has to come from the humanities and the science classes working together. So I know sometimes it can be scary, or you're afraid you're going to annoy someone, but I highly recommend find that science teacher or that English teacher in your school that you feel comfortable reaching out to, and see if you can just do one activity together. Is there something that you can do to bring science and humanities together for your students? Oftentimes it does mean Mike and I are creating a Google Doc and working on it asynchronously at home. I'm very, very fortunate because I am in a STEM school that I have a PLC time with Mike in the biology department this year. My school recognizes the importance of this, but I know that that does not happen everywhere. But if we take a few minutes, throughout the year and throw together a Google document, throw together an assignment that students can do together in both classes, you will be stunned at some of the results. So I do have a few book recommendations that we've used in our classes. I'm sure there are many more. Please feel free to tweet them if you have any great ideas, because I would love more ideas. And I use everything from picture books up to adult books, everything from the full book to just using excerpts with students. So I told you about The Forest Unseen by Dr. David Haskell, and he actually has a new book coming out in 2016, which I'm hoping will be similar. National Geographic has an amazing book of nature poetry that will be released in October. I don't remember the exact date, but I pre-ordered it after seeing it at Book Expo this year. It's gorgeous, and it has poems everywhere from classic poetry up to contemporary poetry, children's poets, adults poets, and beautiful, stunning photography. So I highly recommend that. Kate Mesner's Over and Under the Snow is a great mentor text for what's going on in the world around us that we don't always see. And then my biology colleague just loaned me Feathers by Thor Hansen, which walks the line between YA and adult nonfiction, but it's a great look at birds and things we don't think about with birds and feathers in particular. So I'm about halfway through that right now and absolutely loving it. I've done a lot of work with things like Elliot Schrieffer's Endangered and Threatened, and matching that up in my class with Things Fall Apart and what is going on in Congo today, while my biology colleague Mike talks about biomes and ecosystems and all the things that go along with that. And together, we're always supporting each other whenever possible. So I think I'm almost out of time, but if you have any questions or you have ideas, I'm always open for more ideas. Please feel free to contact me. I'll put my contact info up on Twitter, but you have my Twitter username. I'm always online, and I can be reached at thereadingzone@gmail.com. And I think I'm at 12:45. So thank you all very much. I can't wait to go check out the Twitter stream, but I couldn't multitask that much while presenting.
Thank you, Sarah. And thanks to all those who joined this session. Sarah, you gave some really fabulous ideas, and I can't wait to try some of those with my students. If you enjoyed this free workshop, please consider donating to the Book Love Foundation. The link can be found at the gathering.theeducationcollaborative.com website. You can also find the archive of all the sessions from today, and also you can find these wonderful upcoming sessions for session 3 from Franz Davis, Scott Bonner, and Chad Everett, one by Brian Sweeney and Ryan Dunbar, Lisa Eckholt, Dina Schweikart, Emily Patrick. Lots of great learning coming up. If you can't stick around, definitely make sure you check out the video archives. So thank you, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.